Hola, hola, ¿cómo estamos? My name is Blanca Torres. I am the CHCI Public Policy Fellow sponsored by ConocoPhillips. I am delighted to be with you today for our Moment in History, the State of Immigration Reform session. As a DACA recipient from Honduras, immigration has impacted my entire life. For Latinos, it intersects with us in every way. The need for reform is long overdue, and it's important we continue having conversations like the one today to push that agenda forward. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank the Casey Family Programs, Forward.us, the Immigration Hub, and Service Employees International Union for the generous support of this session. It is now my pleasure to welcome your remarks from Leah Parada. Leah Parada is the Hub's Chief Advocacy Officer. She brings deep expertise working with Congress and national advocacy campaigns engaged in critical policy fights. Leah leads the Hub's advocacy, working with partners to secure a path to citizenship and protect undocumented communities and asylum seekers.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Blanca mentioned, my name is Leah Prada, and I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer at the Immigration Hub, a national organization dedicated to advancing fair and just immigration policies. We're thrilled to be participants at this year's CHCI Policy Conference. And now, Congressman Correa unfortunately could not be here, but I do want to take a moment to recognize our partners on the Hill, the conscience of the Hill for immigrants' rights, and that's the Congressional Hispanic Caucus with Congressman Correa, who have taken a pivotal role in fighting for dreamers and leaving no stone unturned, fighting for a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants in this country. Despite the CHC's heroic efforts and their allies on the Hill, we are no closer to a breakthrough in Congress than we have been in the last 30 years. We find ourselves in a moment in history that is similar to when President Obama and then Vice President Biden took decisive action and issued a landmark policy of their administration, DACA. We are proud to have DACA recipients working at the Immigration Hub, proud that CHC hosts DACA recipients as fellows and interns on the Hill, and also know that this policy, we're going to continue to fight for it. Today, there is a call among mayors, governors, business leaders, and Latino voters urging President Biden to utilize the same playbook to provide work permits to immigrants currently in the U.S. The Immigration Hub, along with Somos Votantes and Unidos U.S. Action Fund, commissioned a poll of likely Latino voters in key states and districts. We found that an overwhelming majority of Latino voters would be more enthusiastic to support President Biden if he were to take decisive action to provide work permits for undocumented immigrants, including essential workers, dreamers, and other long-term undocumented immigrants. The Biden administration has the opportunity to marry good politics with good policy to transform the lives of immigrant communities and boost our economy. He has a number of tools within his administrative powers, like TPS, to protect families, and we urge him to seize the moment. I have no doubt you'll hear a lot more of this from my esteemed panelists. I want to thank you again, CHCI, for including the Immigration Hub, and I look forward to a successful CHCI Policy Conference. Thank you.
Gracias, Leah. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Javier Vega. Javier Vega is a Noticias Telemundo correspondent in Washington, D.C., and a part of the 2018 and 2021 Emmy Award-winning teams for Outstanding Newscast or News Magazine in Spanish language for Noticias Telemundo Mediodía and Noticias Telemundo. Please welcome Javier Vega.
Gracias. ¿Sí se oye? You hear me? Okay. Buenas tardes. How are you all? Good evening. Bien. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here for the introduction. And thank you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute for the invitation to moderate this session called Our Moment in History, the State of Immigration Reform. Now, let me begin with two facts. First fact, the United States of America is a country of immigrants. We all know it. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or independent, everybody accepts and agrees with this fact. We are a country of immigrants. Second fact, our immigration system is broken. Everybody agrees. So put those facts together, and what we have there is a paradox. A country of immigrants with a broken immigration system. And it's a paradox that hurts. So the good news here is that there is a solution. And the solution is a long overdue immigration reform. So that's why we're here. That's our topic today. And that's why I believe this is one of the fundamental sessions in this year's conference. So thank you so much for choosing this session. And thank you for our panelists for being here. Let me introduce them one by one. All four of them, top-level experts. And I was just talking to them before the panel, just fantastic to meet them. So let me introduce them one by one. First of all, Monsignor Kevin Sullivan, to my left, Executive Director of Catholic Charities New York since 2001, after serving as Chief Operating Officer for 5 years and in other leadership positions for more than 17 years. Catholic Charities New York is a federation of over 90 human service agencies that provide help and hope to New Yorkers in need throughout 10 counties of the metropolitan area of New York. Bienvenido. Welcome, Monsignor.
Gracias.
Andrea Flores, Vice President of Immigration Policy and Campaigns at Forward.us. Andrea has spent her career working to reform the nation's immigration system. Most recently, she served as Chief Counsel to Senator Robert Menendez, where she advised the senator on immigration and judiciary issues. She also advised on immigration policy both the Obama and Biden administration. Welcome, bienvenida, Andrea.
Thank you.
Leti Salcedo, Immigration Program Director for Service Employees International Union, a labor union with 2 million members united by a belief in the dignity and worth of working people and the services they provide. She firmly believes that we must strive every day to change the balance of power in this country to benefit low-wage people, people of color, and women. Leti, bienvenida.
Gracias.
Finally, Jorge Cabrera, Managing Director of Casey Family Programs, overseeing Casey's direct services work in Arizona and California. Casey is a national operating foundation based in Seattle, Washington that provides direct services to foster youth in partnership with the public child welfare system and other community organizations. Bienvenido, Jorge. Let's just give him an applause. I want to make a quick survey here. Who speaks Spanish in the audience? Oh. Who speaks, are you all fully bilingual, Okay. I mean, English is not my first language, so be patient with me. And if either of the panelists or I just puts there a little Spanish word, just be patient. For all of you in the audience, take notes. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. And I think that's the most important part and the most interesting of the session when you make your own questions. So we'll make sure to have time for that. And we have also a hashtag CHCIHHM23, which I believe stands for Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute Hispanic Heritage Month 23. So, yes. Feel free to share your videos and pictures and comments using that hashtag. So let's begin, without further introduction, with one question I will make to all of the panelists to start the discussion. Each of them will have about 2 minutes to answer it. So my question is, how would you characterize the current situation of the immigration system in the United States? And if you had to choose one, I know it's difficult, but let's try to do it. If you had to choose just one element of it, which do you think is the most urgent to reform or change? Monsignor.
Very simply, it's socially broken, but not politically broken. It's socially broken because it hurts families, it hurts individuals, it hurts the nation. But it's politically functional because it works in primaries in which people can use immigrants to weaponize their opponents. So the system is broken in reality, but politically, to keep it broken is advantageous to people who have to run in partisan primaries. That, at the end of the day, is the reality of the system. You want to solve immigration? Do away with primaries, and then we got a shot at solving the immigration issue. The second part of the question is, as was said in the introduction, if there's only one thing we can do immediately, work, trabajo. Porque cada persona que viene a los Estados Unidos comes in order to get a job. We know how low the unemployment rate is. We know that people come to because they want to work. So let's figure out how we do that, whether it's humanitarian parole, temporary protective status, or whatever means the intelligent lawyers can come up with to figure out how people can work. My preference would be just repeal the I-9 requirement of the 1986 legislation. For 2 centuries, you didn't need an authorization to work. You showed up, you could do the job, you got hired. For the last 50 years, of the 250 years of our country, now you got to prove an authorization to work. We did okay for two centuries. Why don't we go back to before 1986 and just let people work who can work?
Thank you, Monsignor. Andrea?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with CHCI. So I would say that characterizing the immigration system simply, it's outdated and it's inhumane. It's outdated in the sense that for American communities, for cities, for businesses, for American families, they cannot either bring people into the country, whether it's people to come work, whether it's bringing your family member in. It's not meeting the needs of any population of Americans who need the immigration system to function. And then it's inhumane for immigrants themselves. It's inhumane for DACA recipients, for the long-time undocumented. It's inhumane for new arrivals, and it's inhumane for would-be migrants who have no choice really but to trek through several countries and utilize very dangerous smuggling networks, because that's the set of incentives our laws have created. It's not working for anyone right now, and I think what we're seeing in the current moment is it really breaking down and very visibly in our cities. But in terms of solutions, obviously the most immediate one is going to be work authorization for as many people as possible. Right now, the Biden administration can take pretty quick steps, whether that's issuing temporary protected status, waiving fees for work authorization applications. So there are real solutions right now, and I know we'll talk long-term about maybe what's slowing some of these down politically, but right now we're lucky that we do have President Biden in office because he can take action. He just needs to hear that political pressure to do it as soon as possible.
Letty?
No question, from the eyes of the people who seek asylum, who seek authorization to work, it's broken. My parents came to this country in 1967, crossed the border actually got a permit as they crossed the border. And, that's all they had to do at the time. So it's broken, and, all the solutions have been presented here. Our government has solved many difficult problems, no question. They can solve this problem. And it's a question of power. And it's a question of will. And our power is on the line, and so we must do everything we can to, encourage President Biden to do everything in his power and the power of the pen. That includes temporary protective status. Our members, our healthcare workers, doctors on the front line, janitors, those that you greet when you're coming through the airport, the wheelchair, the people who help take your baggage. Those are frontline workers who are waiting for the power of the pen of the president to act to help protect their families. So we think in the short term, TPS and all the solutions that the president can provide long term, obviously is a path to citizenship for the folks who've been in the country for a long time.
Jorge?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. It's really great to be here with you all, and it's hard to disagree. I mean, I think that my fellow panelists have already very eloquently articulated what is the current situation in the immigration, and certainly talk about what needs to happen, right, from a political position to make sustainable change. What certainly what I'm interested in as a representative of the foundation that I work for, Casey Family Programs, but also as an immigrant myself, right, who had the great benefit of pursuing immigration to my father and achieving, you know, an education and then a professional trajectory, is that I think what is lost in the cacophony of the politics and the back and forth, that what is really lost is missing is really the recognition that these immigrants are members of our community here and now already, right? We are have been actively working on creating better pathways for well-being for the hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied minors that have come through this country over the last several years, who are now, in this day and age, members of our community. And as members of our community, they are worthy of all of the supports and the responses that provide dignity and pathways to well-being. And that's what I think we need to be mindful of, right? These are also many members of our community who come with high levels of trauma, both historical trauma by the origins of the decision to come to this country, and then the harrowing trials and tribulations of journeying and migrating to this country, and then to find themselves in situations where in their communities, you know, they're struggling, right, to make ends meet, right. So that is a matter that's close to my heart, and it is really I'm very grateful for the opportunity that we are actively working on pursuing those community pathways for this population. So, thank you.
Thank you all. So now I will make a question for each one of you, like a different question. You will have about 2 minutes to answer each question. First, I'm going to start with Andrea. Andrea, who's coming right now through the southern border? We were just checking the statistics, and the last month was an all-time record high again. So who's coming, and what's the current situation in the border right now?
So in terms of who's coming, it has, in some ways, it's still consistent with what we've seen maybe for the last 10 years, where the majority of new arrivals are coming from Central American countries, predominantly El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. And the remainder, number one, is still immigrants from Mexico who are coming. But the new and the change, and one of the challenges that we're seeing right now at the border is we also have very new populations coming. So for the last 3 years now, Venezuelans have been in the top 10 numbers of arrivals. Other numbers that have gone up, Ecuadorians, Cubans, Haitians. And we're also seeing people from China, from India. And so what that means is that the needs at the border are changing really dramatically and very quickly. So before you could have a system built around, you have Spanish language interpreters who are working for CBP, legal service providers are serving populations of people who may have family already in the United States. But as we're seeing increased levels of global displacement, I always like to remind people there are 20 million people displaced in the Western Hemisphere alone right now, who are either going to decide to cross borders and come to places like the US, or if there are interventions before that, they can maybe find safety perhaps closer to home. But in the absence of any change, the numbers we're seeing are very likely to continue without a different set of policies, not just at our border, but throughout the region. Because when you think about it, our border policies can really do very little in terms of influencing the decisions of very vulnerable people who have to flee their homes. They're not making a choice necessarily based on whether there's a new asylum ban at the border or not. They're making a choice often based off of survival and necessity. And so one of the challenges at the border is we've never really built a border processing system for vulnerable populations, and we've really needed to for the last 10 years. And so what I mean by that is we have law enforcement meeting families, we have law enforcement babysitting children, we have facilities that aren't built for human beings to stay in more than 72 hours at a time. And so I always start the challenge, the challenge really starts there. But then the impact of our border policies don't end at the border, right? People are coming in now, maybe they don't have family ties, they're ending up in places like New York, Chicago, Boston. So the way we think about immigration policy is rapidly changing right now. So we need to think, why do we have these work authorization limits for asylum seekers? That's actually not serving any of our needs. But why we have those limits is because in the 90s, we were trying to deter more migrants from coming, right? It's that deterrence first model that is actually now hurting American communities and migrants. So when I like to sort of unpack all those different factors. So when we see border numbers, it's not just, you know, this many hundreds of thousands of people. Behind them are a set of opportunities perhaps to help people find safety in different ways. But one thing I want to highlight is the Biden administration has made some progress in giving some nationalities alternatives to simply coming to the border. These created really important parole programs for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. And that's allowing people to fly into airports. It's allowing people to come with a financial sponsor. That's a really transformative change for border policy and for immigration policy that I would hope that he would expand to other nationalities, because if you're from Guatemala right now, your option is still only to come to the border and seek asylum. And that comes with a great level of danger and sacrifice. So that's what I'm currently seeing. And I know we'll talk more about what's happening in cities, but it's unsustainable without a new approach for all of us and for migrants and for receiving communities alike.
Thank you, Andrea. And we will certainly be talking about what's happening in these cities. I just want to talk a little bit about, because it's a very important topic, and you just talk about the vulnerable populations. Jorge is very involved in working with unaccompanied minors, the family reunifications. Jorge, would you say the government is failing them right now?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, because in fact we have been seeing that the Office of Refugee Resettlement has been gradually increasing the amount of resources that they make available for what is deemed as post-release services to these youth and their sponsor families, right? Which is, as many of you know, once a good number of these youth that come to this country are already in pursuit of living with family members that are here, or known individuals from their countries of origin, but mostly as family, right? That is what we know. And once that the ORR determines that that is a valid family, that there is a connection there, they place them with them, and they offer some very limited post-release services, right? It's, basically they provide some case management to secure school placement, some healthcare services, but it is very minimal and sufficient. And really, I think that they have recognized, OR has recognized the need to increase the support, because as I previously mentioned, right, these are children that bring with them high levels of trauma, right? And that manifests in all kinds of different ways, behaviorally, emotionally. As you also know, because that's been very much in the headlines, they also come with an interest of working, right? They have debts to pay, and they want to contribute, and the families, their sponsor families, also have some expectations of that sort, because as you also may understand, some of these sponsor families themselves are also in states of poverty, and some of them undocumented, right? So it is a reality, right, that what is available to them still continues to be insufficient, right? And that is where we sit with this need for a broader community response. And to complicate the picture also, we know that many of these families are invisible in so many ways, sometimes by choice, right, for obvious reasons, right? So a need to do outreach, a need to create a continuum of a community response, right? And that is what we are seeking out to do, right? And I really want to emphasize this community response, because these are youth who, many of them are here to stay. They are not going away, right? Whether they have a legal pathway or not, they are here to stay. So it is incumbent upon all of us to really recognize that they are and will be members of our community. And they also bring hopes and dreams, just like everybody else. I was reading there was a survey that the Los Angeles Times recently conducted that spoke that while Native American, those that are residents and born in this country, have felt not a lot of hope about the future of this country in its current state. Immigrants, on the other hand, feel very hopeful about being in this country and what this country offers for them. So we need to seize upon that. We need to really lift those hopes and dreams and create something better for them, right? So I think that is what we ought to be able to do. And I think that's certainly something that the government is recognizing, although we still would like to see a more broader response.
Thank you, Jorge. Like Andrea said, many of these immigrants are arriving to particular cities, such as New York. Monsignor, I know your work is based in New York, so we have heard that there's not enough support, not enough resources. How do we solve this crisis, migrant crisis in those cities?
So I just want to kind of emphasize what Andrea said. This is a global issue. She said there are 29 million displaced people in this hemisphere. There are about 110 million displaced people worldwide. Of those, probably about 40 million of them are actually refugees that have crossed borders. This is unprecedented since maybe after the Second World War, even before I was born, okay? So, but what we have not done as a country is to realize we now need to respond as a nation to a worldwide crisis. Now, why are people coming here? As you said, because they're hopeful about the United States. Let me give you three figures. The gross domestic product of the United States is $69,000. The gross domestic product of Venezuela is $4,000. The GDP of the Sudan is $453. 69,000, 4,000, $453. Why are immigrants coming here? Because here's where they can work, support their families to live in dignity. Now, as a nation, we have to realize there is a worldwide global crisis of immigration, of migration, of refugee resettlement. And so it is not New York's problem, not Texas's problem, not California's problem, but it is a national problem. Is how do we stand up to be our tradition of a welcoming nation that not only welcomes new immigrants, but benefits and thrives because of what immigrants bring to this country. We just need to stand up a humanitarian response from the federal government, which has been ghost in this whole current crisis, in order to respond as a nation in a humanitarian way for the benefit of those who are coming and for the benefit of ourselves as a nation. It's a national problem. It's a federal problem. The federal government has to stand up.
Thank you, Monsignor. Let me follow up on that with Leti. Leti, the immigrant population is climbing again, according to the census. Do you think the United States as a country values enough the economic contributions, the importance of that immigrant population?
Well, I'll ask the crowd here, during the pandemic, who knew somebody, an essential worker that went to work? During the pandemic, how were immigrants recognized as being essential workers? We saw that. Polls show that, that support for essential workers during the height of the pandemic was very high. It has decreased since then, but people still see the value of immigrant workers to this economy. I think, let me throw some numbers at you. Immigrants, workers contribute trillions of dollars to the US GDP and billions of dollars to local and state economies. We know they pick our fruits, they care for the elderly, they care for your kids, our kids or children of those that go to work. They make this economy run. We know that immigrants play a vital role in this economy. Even Biden knows this. His economic advisors tell him, that 11 million people who are undocumented will help the U.S. labor supply and the U.S. economy. He knows it. So, essential workers, immigrants are essential workers. I think 23 million people who are undocumented face risk of deportation. They are the people who care for your kids. They are the people who care for the elderly. They're doctors, nurses. We know this. We know people in our families. They're essential to continue to lift up this economy. I just want to throw out one fact. We have a great tsunami coming, and this is particularly important to SEIU. We know that those folks are aging. The 65 and older will need care. Our members who are SEIU members who work throughout the country caring for people with disabilities and the aging, there are so many aging people that there will be a crisis for those that need to get care. And so immigrants play that role. That doesn't mean we want to commodify immigrants. Let's just recognize that essential role, lift that up, lift up that story to the right and to those who want to negate the fact that immigrants are essential to this economy, and we need to recognize them for that.
Thank you, Letty. Let me go to one of the current issues right now in the news, because as all of you know, DACA was just declared illegal by a federal judge. So that on one side. On the other side, we know because of the polls that a vast majority of Americans, more than 70%, it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, support giving a legal status to Dreamers. So given those numbers, and I would love if each one of you could answer this question that I have. Why, with that support for the Dreamers, hasn't the Congress already solved this issue? Monsignor.
I said it in the beginning. It's the political system we have in which there are primaries. And so somebody who stands up there on one side of the aisle who says, I want to do the right thing and enable Dreamers to have a permanently legal status is going to get primaried from her or his extreme. So we have paralysis here. It's completely a political reason why we haven't solved DACA, which is just such common sense.
Andrea, do you agree?
I think it hasn't been a political priority now for too long. And what I mean by that is I think this administration has promised to defend DACA fully in court. It has promised to remove barriers where possible for existing DACA recipients. When we're talking about undocumented youth, we're talking, and I want to recognize that there are people in this audience who may identify as undocumented or be directly impacted. This has not been a congressional priority for Democrats in the way we didn't see it up there with, commitments to climate change, to infrastructure, to healthcare. And I think there was a bit of a missed window in these last 2 years before, especially in the lame duck session, there were windows of opportunity where we could have crafted a DACA deal. I really believe that, and it was not there, and the politics weren't there, and I think that's disappointing. And I think, as recognizing in the Latino community, we're most impacted by our current immigration system just numerically. That's a sort of something to organize around, and something that we need to hold our champions even more accountable, because it's amazing that we have champions, but when we created DACA and in 2012, we weren't supposed to still be fighting for the dignity of Dreamers. We were supposed to be fighting for the dignity of their parents and their siblings and other family members. But we're here and we have a Democratic president, and I think this is a moment, in addition to fighting for things like temporary protected status, we can't forget that it is an incredibly politically popular goal. And we act like immigration is this, this third rail of politics, when in reality there are relief programs and opportunities to make progress on things such as protecting Dreamers if we had a little bit more of a political prioritization for the administration and our own champions.
Letty and Jorge, why hasn't DACA been solved by Congress yet?
I couldn't agree more with Andrea. I think it's about power. Listen, we know this is going to be a majority country by 2050. The right knows this. There's no question that they are not going to give a freebie to Biden on giving status to young people, permanent status to young people. And so this would be a win for Biden if he won that legislatively. And so, it is about power, and it's, we have the ability, given the election in 2024, to show our communities, show Biden that this is something he has to deliver on. Poll after poll, Leah just talked about the Immigration Hub's poll shows the Latino community wants solutions, temporary solutions, TPS, parole, anything that's within the power of the president. So this is ultimately about power, and we know that the right is held the middle, the Democratic right held the president hostage on this legislative fix. So we need to, elections are where we exercise our power, and we need to, every election matters. We know this, we have to work it, and we have to organize like hell to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think it continues to be amazing that this issue has not been resolved, right? I mean, I come from a place of having seen what happens to individuals who have been stripped of their identity, who have been, separated from what they call home, from what they call, their place as Americans, right? And I think that's at the end of the day, these are probably some of the most American, individuals that we know, right? Not that different from any of us who have been the method of being in this country for a long time, right? And so I think that's where it comes. It's a very narrow view, right? A very narrow view of that is, as my fellow panelists is mirrored in politicking, right? But without the recognition that there is a future that we need to take into consideration, right? It doesn't do it does a big disservice, right, for us as a whole, as a country, as a community, when we are deliberately delaying, right, the affirmation of these of the dreamers as Americans, as members of our society, as dreamers, right, who have hopes and contributors, right? So to me, it's just a puzzling scenario, right, that it's still not been affirmed.
Thank you, Jorge. So I'm moving to Q&A in a couple of minutes. I just want to make a quick question because I want to know your take about this discussion that I see every time I cover immigration on the Capitol Hill or immigration demonstrations around Capitol Hill. There seems to be a debate if some people support the idea of all or nothing, fix all or do nothing, or maybe solve separate issues little by little. What's your take on that? Do you support the all or nothing approach, or is it okay to solve, talking about immigration reform, separate issues little by little? Monsignor.
The goal is comprehensive reform, but we'll take it piece by piece, whatever we can get.
Andrea.
I think, the immigration movement has been fighting really valiantly for 20 years now to try and get the one big bill to fix all the different pieces of the system. And I think that now it's really important to pivot to, it's getting what we can now, but it's also pushing on every single legal tool we have, which is why I just want to highlight again, right now the president has full authority to help probably millions of people get temporary protected status. That would be life-changing for the currently undocumented in this country, right? So starting to think about victories that we can give to the undocumented differently. And so, yes, they need citizenship, but how life-changing would it be to have deportation protections plus a work permit for long-time undocumented communities who are eligible for TPS? We've never had a TPS designation for Guatemala. That's wild. And so I think of now the whole reform question as, what can the president do right now and what can Congress do long term? I'll be fighting for all of the above.
Letty.
Yeah, take what we can now. We shouldn't wait. We'll die on the vine waiting. And so I couldn't agree with Andrea again more on TPS. It's 3.5 million, I think the calculations. That's about a third of the undocumented population whose life will be transformed with some Safety. We speak from the vantage point. We brought the kids and grandkids, 10-year-old, 7-year-old, of TPS holders to lobby Congress. They should not have to worry about if they're going to see their grandparent or parent. They should be kids. They should be, enjoying life as kids. And so, yes, if there's a solution now on TPS or any of the, like I said earlier, that's in the control, the power, the pen of the president, let's do it.
Jorge, all or nothing or small victory?
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about whatever we can take, like my colleagues said. I think, all or nothing, that's not reality, right? That's not how the real world works. I mean, as I mentioned in my initial remarks, these immigrants are members of our community right now, right, and who are in need of a humane response and who are in need of, relief. So I think it's we need to piecemeal it if that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Jorge. So it's your time now. 10 minutes for questions and answers. Q&A, there's a microphone in the back. So feel free to just go back there and ask your question. I'm sure this will be very interesting. So what's your name?
Tomas Hernandez.
Tomas, welcome.
Mucho gusto.
Please ask your question.
Yeah, first off, thanks for the conversation. It's been very insightful, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing to uplift immigrant communities. I think the thing to highlight that wasn't really discussed is, why are people leaving and coming here? And it's important to know American intervention abroad that has had an impact on a lot of these communities, right? So what are ways that this country can uplift those countries so that the people that are fleeing at least have something to rely on if they're not able to leave their homes?
Who wants to answer Tomas' question? Is that addressed to anyone in particular?
Whoever wants to take it. I know it's a big one.
I mean, it's absolutely simple, the answer, hard to do, that there needs to be economic development in those countries throughout the world. And our foreign policy and our foreign aid should be towards the development of economic opportunities in places where people feel they do not have any. I've been to the Northern Triangle. I've been there and seen that the kids there feel they don't have any choice, whether it be no jobs, whether it be the violence of gangs. They don't want to migrate. They just feel they have no opportunity. So a full-scale support for economic development globally is what's needed. Long-term, that's the issue, hard to achieve, but that's the ultimate answer.
Gracias, Tomás.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Aina Garcia. I actually just wanted to make a comment. So I'm actually from Texas, from El Paso, Texas, from the border. But I just wanted to say a few things. You mentioned why are people leaving, and it isn't a very simple answer. You can definitely say, economic, infrastructure, and securities. But I like, for example, Haitians. Many Haitians are leaving their countries because of gang violence. And the reality is that it's just so, I guess there aren't a lot of good apples anymore. There are more bad apples, so the people are fleeing. I mean, these people are literally living on $2 a day. So this is so unfortunate. This is why they're leaving. And they, as you said, they don't care about, any asylum bans or any laws that have been placed by this country, and they've been using, as you said, the deterrence method. They don't care. So I guess I just wanted to say 2% of Mexican-American women are attorneys in El Paso, and which is low because we have a huge migrant crisis down at the southern border. And I just wanted to bring awareness to this issue because this is an issue. We need more attorneys in El Paso, Texas, because for every 700 people, there is one attorney, which is terrible because in Austin, Houston, you have a 17-to-1 ratio. So I just really wanted to bring awareness to this issue. And if you guys are studying law, please, consider El Paso because I I would love to be an immigration attorney, but I can't do it alone. So please help.
I'll just say I'm from Las Cruces, and I'm a Mexican-American attorney, and I just echo the call for more legal service providers to go to the border because that's one of the best ways to help the situation.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Ana, right? Yes. Ana Garcia. Thank you. What's your name?
Hello, I'm Adriana Hernandez. I'm a CACI intern. I'm also from Seattle, Washington. And my question is, since this topic is something that has been going on for so many years, and I hear this from people in my community that it feels like every time there's like a new election, they always promise these things, but it never goes anywhere. How do we keep the momentum going, and how do we keep the people still involved and still inspired to continue supporting, immigration reform?
I mean, I'll use the wise words of Gracia Martinez, who's the executive director of United We Dream. We're our own saviors. We can't depend on anybody else to deliver for us. And so, I come from an organizing background, and we got to organize to keep our communities involved, motivated, and putting the pressure on decision makers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for bringing attention to this issue. My name is Gabi Corrales, and I work at the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project, and we do work along the southern border. And I just wanted to highlight a point that was made that I thought was really relevant and get your thoughts. Right now, Customs and Border Protection is one of the biggest family and child care providers in the country, and we're seeing families sitting in those short-term facilities for days at a time with the lights on 24 hours a day in conditions that are definitely inhumane. And inspector after inspector provides the same results. What do you think the Biden administration could do today to help solve that issue?
I can take it.
Okay.
Okay, I have thoughts. I want to point to something that the Biden administration has done in the past that I thought was really admirable, and that was they had 20,000 Ukrainians at the border in Tijuana, and quietly, in collaboration with local organizations, safely brought them over. We didn't hear anything else about it. I'll also use another example. 70,000 Afghans came to the United States. We resettled them. There should have been more, but the federal government brought together multi-agencies, legal service providers, nonprofits, child care providers, the Red Cross, a whole government response to help them resettle, process them, and help them start their lives in the US. And so I have been pushing, including when I was in both administrations, for a similar approach to those who are coming from the Western Hemisphere. I think our border infrastructure is completely ill-equipped, as you pointed out, but we absolutely, speaking of our champions, and this is work that I think if you care about this issue, if you want people to be treated humanely at the border, you must push Democrats in Congress to push the administration to do what they have the authority to do right now to prevent kids from being held outside, which we're seeing over and over again, for not having access to water. We need to be calling in a whole government response to the border and stop treating those from the Black and brown migrants who are coming from this hemisphere as deserving of less humanitarian resources. So they can decide to prioritize that, and I think that would make a huge, huge difference in lives are being lost. We had a little girl die in custody. We've had multiple children die in custody. That isn't what the government should be doing, and so. But that is something we don't necessarily need Congress to start fixing. We do need engaged citizens to say we care about how migrant families are treated at the border, and we want the same level of care that we've seen you give to other new immigrants in the country.
I
Let me
agree.
just say-
Thank you.
Let me just echo what Andrea said. The administration has the capacity to do it. It's a federal problem. They can step up and they can establish these humanitarian relief centers. There's absolutely nothing preventing them from doing it except their own political will to do it.
Jorge, you wanted to add something to
I think the only comment I was going to make is coming from the lens of actually being involved in a project at detention facilities for unaccompanied minors, right? That we have to look at it from a lens that is what we call trauma-informed, right? Which basically means to begin with those facilities that are completely inappropriate, right, for, supporting, right, youth to, from a humanitarian perspective, right? So that is at the heart of this, right? That to begin with, right? That if we apply a trauma-informed lens, they wouldn't be there, and they would probably be transitioned out to a more a different setting, right? So I think that we need to look at it from the perspective: who are these youth, and what are they experiencing, and how is the facility setting compounding those problems for them, right?
Thank you, Jorge.
Thank
Gaby
you.
Corrales, very good question. Thank you so much. We still have time for one more, if there's one more question. I always say the best questions come from real curiosity. What's your name?
Marco Ibarra for Synchrony Financial. So I'm originally from Venezuela and moved here in 2009 with the Green Card Lottery. So I'm the exception for Venezuelans currently, right? And since then, a lot of Venezuelans have come with the asylum seekers. My husband actually has been 10 years waiting for that asylum. And there's this myth about after 10 years, your case gets approved and you get a resident. Is that an actual fact? Because it's in the community, just wait for 10 years and then the system will give you the green card right without the case presented to our court. And if it's not true, what resources do they have after certain time frames, or there's any time frames for asylum seekers to have a solution for them? Anyone?
I do know that is a myth. Every case has a different individual adjudication time, so the average is 4 to 6 years. What people will say is that after a certain period of time, you're less likely to become like an enforcement or removal priority. And so right now, as described, your husband wouldn't be in the Biden administration's enforcement priorities, but elections are critical, and it's important we fight for things like hopefully TPS, if your husband is on TPS, but more deportation protections that are going to be harder to roll back, because if President Trump was reelected, anyone who is an enforcement priority right now could be an enforcement priority in 2025. And that's another thing for our champions in the Biden administration to really think about, is how are we protecting the community right now in the event that we do have another Trump administration, because we saw how much pain he was able to quickly cause. And so some of these policies I've mentioned have been calling for could be protective going forward and be hard to challenge in court and would keep people safer in the long term. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Gracias, Marcos. Marcos de Venezuela. So we have to close the session. I want to make the last question for our panelists today, about a minute, 2 minutes to answer. But I think it's a very relevant question to close. What has to happen in this country, politically, demographically, to finally see a comprehensive immigration reform? What has to happen? Monsignor.
I think we have to see, I don't know how we do it, the faces of those who come. It's not about a policy. It's about an individual who is coming here to save her life or his life. It's about an individual family who is coming here to give a better life for their kids. And it is individuals who are coming here who have a dual purpose. One, a better life for themselves, but also to continue to make this nation a welcoming, great nation. It's got to have that human face.
Thank you, Monsignor. Andrea.
I think about this as a Mexican-American woman. I think the Latino community, the Hispanic community, needs to continue to actually prioritize this as a political issue, because who else is fighting for immigrant communities in the numerical number of, the number of votes we actually have to hold people accountable for not supporting immigrants, not giving them the status, not fighting for the undocumented community. I'm very concerned right now that it is getting further and further away from the political debate. The fact that we have not just 11 million undocumented people, but that population is rapidly growing, and we don't really have either party regularly talking about it. And there's a lot of talk about the Latino vote, and there's a talk about how Latinos are moving to the Republican Party, and in part, people are finding that it's because Democrats have not delivered on immigration. So we all hold a great deal of power in, we need to make it a civil rights issue for our community. And sometimes I know people are like, I don't want to be another Latino talking about immigration policy. We have to, if we want to serve the people who have been waiting for us to use our power to act for as long as people have been waiting. So that's why I'm in this work, and I hope I've inspired and recruited some of you to get more involved.
Leti. Gracias, Andrea.
It's about telling those stories. It's about continuing to lift up those impacted individuals, the families. It's about political power, Arizona, Nevada. Let's see, what are my states? Florida, Georgia. California, New York, and even Texas. All those matter. We think that California and New York are important to maintain the House, or get back the House, rather. And I think political power is key, and I'll repeat it again, organize like hell. I think we need to continue to do that and continue to organize in our communities.
Jorge?
Yes, I think my perspective is it's kind of like a bottom-up perspective, and by bottom-up meaning from the community level and from the individual level, right? I think instilling hope, instilling, that there is a pathway out of this, right? That, I think most of us would agree that some of the most resourceful individuals in our communities are immigrants, right? And that they've been able to sustain and survive and sometimes thrive, right? We need more of that, and we need more local organizations that are willing to do that. I said mention about the invisibility of many of these, certainly the unaccompanied minors. We need to make them more visible, right, in ways that affirms that hope that they have and that they bring, and they want to actually make it real.
Well, thank you, each one of you, for your time and for sharing your expertise about immigration in this, I think, very important session. I hope it was thought-provoking. As a news reporter, I just want to say that I feel very honored to serve the immigrant communities and the immigrants in our country with good quality information and news. I believe firmly that our parents, our immigrants are truly heroes, and I'm just proud to serve them every day. And normally, I'm just the guy delivering the news or asking questions. I don't normally give opinions, but let me say this, just this. I hope to be alive, and I think I will be alive, to see a country that finally recognizes the value that the Latinos have in this country. I think I will see it. We're walking slowly towards that place, but we will see it. I hope, I pray. Thank you so much for being here. Gracias a todos. Muy buenas tardes. Thank you so much.
Gracias.